Hi, I'm Tyson.
I'm Colin.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Adam.
And we're the Gamesmiths, and we just got done playing Spectrum Force Scenario 2 Double Trouble.
Double Trouble, right.
Yeah, and Ryan's going to start us off with some of the feedback.
Cool. So, once again, we enjoyed playing your game. It was a lot of fun, and it's a good, cooperative game. I felt, like a member of a non-branded, multicolored action squad. And it was a lot of fun. We noticed you made some of the changes. I like the changes with the Spectrum Blue were solid. I think that red and blue ammo is pretty convoluted and a little too much decision making and like way too much planning ahead. Yeah, so I like just your basic ammo system that we got there. I like that the new mechanic of tapping your card to make your ability one easier on a card every turn was really solid, and that was all fun. I think those were all good additions and streamlined a lot of the parts of the game.
Well, and the mech abilities were upgraded. I noticed that.
Yeah.
And I did feel, it's hard to compare when we didn't switch from the hero mode to the mech mode to see really if that had changed the way that I had expected. But I did feel like my hits were pretty powerful when I used my mech weapon.
Yeah. But you were limited to using it once per turn.
Right.
Whereas in normal mode, you could use your weapon as often as you wanted to.
And I think some of our feedback the first time is we didn't feel like we actually got into a mech. Like that didn't change much that we went into mech mode. So
I do think that part of that was some of the misunderstanding we had with the energy and combining our energy to utilize the attack together. And having had the opportunity to do that in this scenario, I did feel like we were able to more strategically decide when do we pull the big punches and when do we work together to make sure that happens. And I liked that.
Yeah, that was a genuinely different experience than last time. And so, like everybody said, we didn't actually flip the cards this time, but that part was definitely different than the time before.
Yeah.
So I think that was solid.
And we didn't really use the mech that much the first game anyway, so we decided it was a much more useful tool and used it right away because we knew about the time it was going to take between uses.
The power drain,
Power drain.
Yeah.
Well, and I think also with that in mind, kind of rolling in what you're saying there, my experience was the scenarios did feel different, and that was, something
completely different.
It was a different experience.
Definitely. And as to the scenario, as you saw, we played the Banshee and the Black Knight, and we saw the other commanders and could see how the scenario could definitely turn out differently. Our one kind of complaint that we all had was that we didn't really run into any minions, but that was more luck of the draw and something we could have forced in future games if we decide, we prefer a little more minions or minions, spice it up a little bit. We could have gone with the minion commander. We just avoided it because we did that one last time and wanted to try a couple new bosses. So overall, I think we enjoyed the scenario. It's definitely a different gameplay. It kind of has this, just cut to, like if you just want to cut to the boss battle, you can just kind of cut to the boss battle and skip all the minion stuff if you want to do that for that different experience.
Well, and we still had to do quite a lot of strategizing to figure out how we wanted to approach it, if we wanted to split our efforts between both of the bosses or if we wanted to take one down at a time, which is what we ultimately did, and which is probably the best way to do it. But it could have been a harder game had we split between both or been forced to attack one or the other.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot easier.
Yeah, working that way was easier. And I think that I just want to touch on kind of my experience from playing the first time with the first scenario and to playing this time. And again, highlighting the fact that there was some core differences, like we didn't have to defend the central city.
Yeah.
And that we didn't have those powers, so it didn't we didn't have to worry about that quite as much, so we weren't taunting quite as much. We weren't doing the other types of things. I did feel like I was getting access to the different powers and feeling a little bit more uniquely how the characters could be a little bit more versatile, and I thought that was pretty fun. But ultimately, the thing that stands out to me from both experiences, and I think that we can all agree that this is probably because of the type of games that I enjoy, and that maybe we enjoy, and I can't speak for everybody, but to me, there was a level of ease because of that spectrum power. I didn't always feel threatened, that I didn't feel like... I felt like I could let my health go down pretty low because at least one of us could die once before anything got really terrible.
And it would have wiped out all the afflictions, which was we went
benefits.
against affliction bosses,
Right.
so it might have been advantageous, especially after we killed the Dark
Yes.
Knight or the Black Knight, to have somebody die, have no afflictions, and then go back on the board, and then maybe heal them up after.
So I mean, there were some strategies to that. So I didn't feel the urgency or the danger necessarily of losing the spectrum power, and I don't know that that's a bad thing. But it depends on what you're going for, if you want to protect that power or not. But I feel like your scenario does a really good job of feeling unique and feeling different. That's not necessary. But to me, I love the challenge in a cooperative game of trying to stave off all of the terrible, difficult things. And I do feel like there was a lot to manage and a lot to handle. So we got that kind of strategy and that teamwork kind of feel. But I also desired a little bit more difficulty, and again, that could just be me.
Well, I agree, but I think that could have been created by... I think you give us the opportunity to create that. We could have used different bosses that brought out more minions. We could have been on hard difficulty, which allows us no deaths, right? Or just
I think we said it one death.
One
We got
death.
one
Yeah.
death out of it.
Harder. That
and-
is in this scenario, it would have also given more health to the bosses as well.
okay.
Mhm.
So I like the ability to have a game that feels that versatile. We can have an easy game, or we could have a hard game. We've collectively played a lot of Legendary and purchased a lot of expansions for Legendary, and I feel like that's one of the things that I like so much about Legendary is you could pick a weak boss and have an easy game. And you could pick some pretty strong... You could pick the right characters to go against the right boss and create any kind of game that you want.
And then the schemes also interact,
Right.
which adds a different
Which is
depth.
which is here too. You know,
Yeah.
he has his different scenarios.
And so if you were to have, I don't know, 3 to 5 bosses and 3 to 5 scenarios, I think that creates enough room to create any kind of experience that the player wants to create. So we did sit around a little bit off camera between the game and this and talk about, what could have been done to make the game harder or just change the game at all. But I think for me personally, every single one of those questions was solved by taking the elements you already have and just rearranging them ourselves. Like if we didn't see enough minions, that was one of my complaints about the game we just played. But then Ryan said, well, you didn't see this minion boss that we didn't play with, who's
We played this
constantly
last
bringing
time.
out minions.
Right.
And I thought, oh, well, if I want a minion heavy game, then I'll just pick that boss. Or if I don't want a minion heavy game, maybe I'll pick this other boss and crank up the difficulty. And I think giving people that much versatility in the game allows them to have whatever game experience they want. So I, based on that, retracted kind of my feelings and thought, well, if that's the case, I feel like I'm in control of getting whatever experience I want out of this game. And I personally like that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, and it made us have to play a little more cautiously as well, because we knew that there was still a possibility that we may get a minion, and we went through half of the deck and we just didn't see one. And there's
Yeah.
4, so we just got
Lucky in that
we
regard.
got
Yeah.
lucky.
Couple pieces of feedback from me. Number one, this is picky, but going through your rule book, when you depict dice, the game uses D6s and D8s. The you're depicting D10s essentially in your
Instead of
rulebook
D8s?
instead of D8s. So you have D6s and D10s, and whenever you refer to a D6 in your rulebook, a D8 in your rulebook with a picture, it's actually a D10. So you might want to change that image. So I think one of them, the number showing is actually a 9. So it's most definitely a D10. So that's just a picky, nerdy thing, but you should probably fix that. And then I would also consider when you're doing the difficulty on this scenario in particular, tweaking the boss's armor as opposed to their health. I think that might actually be a better way to actually increase the difficulty. I'm not sure 10 health was so much.
It just made the game longer.
But if you added like 2 armor, I think that 1 or 2 armor is, I think, much more affecting how difficult the game feels than 5 to 10 health.
We also talked about decreasing the spectrum forces initial health, so maybe going down to 12 or 10,
as opposed to bumping up the boss.
So make it easier for you to die.
I think specifically for the difficulty on this scenario. And then I would also include, I don't know, I think there's fun experimenting in which ones to put together, but also maybe include a guide on some of the more difficult and easier combinations. Because I bet, the minion boss could have been real tough with the Black Knight if there were a bunch of minions out there. And we were
all the afflictions.
Because we're having break and weak. And
But I do think that kind of says a lot to, going back a little bit to Adam's point there and kind of tagging in on this, is that I love the amount of variability that this scenario specifically gives you.
Right.
I think there is enough mix and match that this may be the scenario that I'd be more likely to come back to than the first scenario. I'd play the first scenario and get the feel, and it feels really good and fun, but this would be the one that was more of a challenge to me. And I like that a little bit more because I do feel like you have the control to be like, okay, I'm going to change the experience with this specific scenario.
A very deliberate, affectable level of difficulty.
I know how this is going to affect it.
These 2 bosses together are very tough. These 2 bosses together are just... So, I think overall, we once again enjoyed playing your game. Maybe would like it to be a little bit more of a challenge. So, we felt a little threatened, but...
we could have created that, though. Do you still feel like that's a design thing?
I think in the way
because I had the same opinion.
I think in the way that I think in the ways that we mentioned of specifically addressing the difficulty of this scenario, I would do armor and maybe the player's starting health as opposed to adjusting the boss's starting health.
In the easy, normal
I just
modifiers.
think about that.
Okay.
And then maybe for easy, it's where it's at. For normal, you add like 10 health, and then for hard, you add 10 health and 5 armor to each boss or something like that. So I would just also consider, the only things I would consider changing, because you're right, we can control the difficulty. We can make it more difficult. I guess.
I think lots of mids and minions would have made that way harder. Just because
and
we're still getting the same hits by them. We're also getting hit by minions, but we can't even get to the bosses until we clear the minions.
But we also have to think if we're having more minions, that means we're either losing like the discard effect of the Banshee, or we're losing the afflictions of the Black Knight and somebody completely getting put out. So
yeah, I don't know.
And then maybe even some like teamwork cards between the bosses as well. They're working together, so thematically it might be fun to have some cards that.
There was one more thing we wanted to talk about.
Oh.
We're not all super jazzed on the term discharge for the Spectrum Blacks ability. Discharge is not a pleasant word.
No.
So
not in the USA, at least.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I can't imagine the phrase "pleasant discharge" is common anyway.
When I hear discharge, I think like a gun just got.
Right, and maybe
amongst other ideas,
went off when it wasn't supposed to, or another kind of a gun.
Right. So, So ultimately, I came up with the term maybe overload. I don't know if we had any other
dispel. We came up with
I don't know, but I I'd keep workshopping that term in particular.
Yeah.
Thesaurus it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to end
didn't
on
go
that
that
note.
far.
I do want to compliment you that I think that
That's true.
ultimately,
No, that's not, yeah.
from scenario to scenario, the thing that really stood out to me was that the system still works
Yeah.
even when you
Yeah.
apply a different scenario to it. And I thought that was really neat to see the system applied in a slightly different way.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun, different experience. But yeah, I think overall you still have a good game and you have another good scenario.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for sending us your game.